Hey guys, welcome back to Talking the Talkies. My name is Peter Waters, and today I'll be talking all about my favorite first-time watches of September 2021. So without further ado, I have 10 picks today, and I'll try to get through them as quickly as I can. So my first recommendation of the month is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. This is the latest Marvel Cinematic Universe movie to hit theaters, and you can tell this is the 25th film, and you can tell that they are sort of reaching far for some of these superheroes. Shang-Chi is certainly not a character I was familiar with before this movie. He's sort of an obscure character. Pretty much he's a kung fu master, more or less. So despite the fact that this is a hero that no one's really heard of, it actually ended up being a really good movie, and especially the martial arts action in it is fantastic. It borrows a lot from old school movies like Jackie Chan fights. There's one scene set on a bus where he just destroys a bunch of guys, and it's really cool. And there's other scenes that are inspired by other sort of Asian action movies like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where the fighting style is almost like a ballet between two masters at their craft. So I really appreciated that, even though we're so far into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that it still is able to tap into different sides of this genre that we haven't really seen before. So I enjoyed it. The characters were really fun. Awkwafina plays the comedic relief in the role, and the lead characters are really fun. So I highly recommend it for being a solid entry into the Marvel franchise. Alright, my second pick of the month is called Bringing Out the Dead. This one's from 1999, and it's sort of a really underrated Martin Scorsese movie. He, again, reteamed with writer Paul Schrader for this movie, who famously made Taxi Driver back in the 70s, and 20 years later, they reunited for this movie that's essentially Taxi Driver, only set in the world of late-night New York City ambulance drivers, and you get to see like what their routines are like and how intense it is on all these late night calls and these life or death situations. And the lead character is played by Nicolas Cage in a rare, legitimately great performance from Nicolas Cage. I think it's probably his best role. And he plays this conflicted ambulance driver. He's overworked, overtired, and he is racked with guilt over all of the patients that he's tried to save that didn't make it. And on the streets that are really lit in this bright way, it's almost like the ghosts of his patients are still haunting the sidewalks on their late night runs. And it's just a really interesting movie, a slice of life that, it's one of those jobs you definitely probably don't want to have. It seems really intense. And the rest of the cast is amazing as well. Scorsese, as always, he really casts the movies well. John Goodman plays one of the fellow ambulance drivers, and he's great in it. And Patricia Arquette, so it's a stacked cast. It's a really solid movie, and, it's one of those things that even Scorsese fans might have overlooked it, so I wouldn't let that one slip you by. It's Bringing Out the Dead, and it's a really good one. Alright, next up is my pick of the month, and this one, fair warning, it is extremely depressing, but it's a documentary series, a mini-series, put on by National Geographic called 9/11, One Day in America. And pretty much what this series is it interviews a whole bunch of the pretty much survivors during that day, a lot of firefighters, people who managed to evacuate out of the towers. It's pretty much everyone that was around that area that were just pedestrians caught up in this horrific day in American history. And it is extremely sad and upsetting and intense, and there's a lot of footage from that time, so it sort of unfolds in real time, and it really illuminates some of those life or death decisions, especially that the firemen had to make during that day. And it kind of goes without saying that a lot of those firemen were heroes that day, but you really get to just how selfless some of those guys were going up floor after floor, considering that this might be the last day they were alive, and they still went up there to try to save as many people as possible. It's an amazing documentary, probably easily the best one about 9/11 that I've seen. It was just recently, last month, it was the 20th anniversary of 9/11, so there was like a whole bunch of different documentaries. I know there was one on Netflix and one on Apple TV Plus, but although this is the only one I saw last month, I highly recommend it. I can't imagine anything could be better than it. It's just so well produced. So that is my pick of the month. You know, it's very heavy, but I think it's essential viewing. So definitely check that one out from National Geographic. All right, the next movie is another one that I caught in theaters recently called Small Engine Repair, and it's one of those like little indie movies that plays in theaters for like a week and then gets out. But pretty much this one is about these three longtime friends. They're sort of blue-collar New Englanders, and it's actually set in Manchester, New Hampshire, which is not far from where I live, so it was kind of cool to have like a local movie. But anyway, these three friends, they sort of helped raise one of their daughters all together. And then, without spoiling anything, let's just say that certain dramatic things happen involving the daughter, and sort of they have to basically reform their friendship and you know, put the past in the past in order to deal with some of these developments. I really enjoyed this movie. I didn't have any idea where it was going, and I think that's kind of the magic of it. It starts off as just like a typical sort of drama, and you get involved with the characters, and then once a certain thing happens, then you know you're so into what these characters are doing that you're like afraid what's going to happen next. So I really liked it. The main three cast members, one of them is played by John Bernthal, who you probably, if you've seen The Walking Dead, he played Shane on that show. Also, Shea Wiggum is in the show, who I just recently saw in Boardwalk Empire. And then the third guy, he's played by John Polino, I believe it's pronounced, and he is also the writer and director of the film. So it's a really strong movie, strong acting, with an ending that's probably going to be controversial, but I really thought it was an intense ride. So if you want a movie that sort of goes to unexpected places, and it's sort of this thriller, but with really strong characters, I suggest Small Engine Repair. All right, next up is a sort of hidden gem of a horror movie that came out in 1988 called Dream Demon, and it's sort of the British answer to A Nightmare on Elm Street. It follows this woman who is a fiancée to this wealthy, important man, basically, in London society, and at night, she has all these nightmares about what her life is going to be like. She dreams about her husband not respecting her and the paparazzi going after her. And the dreams, you know, just escalate into nightmare territory. And pretty soon her reality and her dreams start blurring and things get really intense. It's really one of those movies that it has a sort of 80s cheese ball factor to it, but it also has this very surreal quality that I appreciated as well. When it's in the dream sequences, it almost feels like you're in a different planet when you're watching these things. And one of the paparazzi people that are sort of evil is played by Timothy Spall, who people might recognize as Peter Pettigrew from the Harry Potter movies, and he is so evil that it's sort of, you love to hate the guy. He's just such a sleazeball in this movie. The movie goes into this gross out, gory direction that, of course, I appreciated. So, yeah, if you're looking for a horror movie that maybe not a lot of people have heard of, that's sort of dreamlike, but still a fun 80s sort of campy Halloween type movie, I recommend Dream Demon if you can find it. I recommend that one. All right, next up is another movie I caught in theaters. A lot of my theater watching movies ended up on this list this month. And this one is called The Eyes of Tammy Faye. And this one is about famous televangelist, so religious TV personality, Tammy Faye, and her husband And it's the true story of these two, this power couple, basically establishing what today is like modern religious television programming. And Tammy Faye, she always sees the good in people and she wants to spread this positive message, but at the same time, the more she gets entrenched into this media storm of, like, you know, trying to up the numbers and things, soon enough the network turns out to be more corrupt and doing shady things, and they're not really promoting the messages that she would view, and her life starts to spiral out of control. And it's sort of like the same template that you would see in a lot of these biopic movies, especially of musicians. Tammy Faye herself was a musician, as well as a, you know, spreading her word. That's how she got it out, was through song. And so, yeah, you start to see the typical downward spiral. A lot of people are complaining that it follows too closely that template, but I thought it was a fascinating true story. I've never really seen this type of figure given this treatment before. It reminded me a little bit of I, Tonya, in that it takes a woman who's maybe misrepresented in the media. Her story might be misunderstood at face value, but it gives her perspective. The movie gives sort of back her own story. And I really appreciated it. I thought Jessica Chastain as Tammy Faye, she never disappoints ever. And I think she deserves an Oscar nomination for this role. She is amazing in it. And Andrew Garfield, as well as her husband, is also great. It's probably one of his best performances. I really recommend checking out The Eyes of Tammy Faye. I think it gets to the heart of a lot of problems with the intersection of business and religion that we see a lot in especially America. All right, the next movie is one from 1974. It's an heist thriller called The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. And this movie stars Robert Shaw, who you probably recognize as Quint from Jaws, the old sea captain. In this one, it's sort of the exact opposite of that character, where he's this very refined, in-control guy who is robbing a subway train in New York City. And it's pretty much up to all of the operators of the subway to try to defuse the situation and get it all under control. Meanwhile, all these trench-coated, you know, heist people are, you know, holding everyone on the subway hostage. The main hostage negotiator, the officer on the other line, is played by Walter Matthau, who is probably one of the great character actors of all time. He just has one of those great faces of the movies, and he plays like comedy and drama really well. He balances it out really well, and this is just a straightforward, really entertaining movie, and it's also kind of a time capsule of New York in the 1970s, seeing, you know, how the subway operated and how the town looked, or the city looked back then. It was really interesting to me. So yeah, it's a straightforward movie, but it is really entertaining. And also, without spoiling anything, I think it has among one of the best final shots of any movie of this type. So stay to the end and pause the movie right before the credits, and I think you'll appreciate that final little moment. All right, the next movie, another indie movie that I caught in theaters last month. This one is called Blue Bayou, and the reason why I was super excited for this movie is its director, Justin Chon, directed my favorite movie of 2017, I want to say, called Gook, and that movie I saw before a lot of people saw it at the Independent Film Festival Boston, where I volunteered, and the producer of that movie did like a Q&A afterwards, and he talked about the movie. And I went in knowing absolutely nothing. I heard no buzz about it. I sort of on a whim watched it because I figured, you know, take advantage of the opportunity, getting in free, volunteering and everything. And it turned out to be one of my favorite movies of that year. And Blue Bayou is very similar to the movie Gook. Just like that other movie, it's shot really beautifully. This one is it has one of the best opening shots of any movie I've seen this year. The acting is phenomenal, and the story sort of talks about a man with a split identity between being an American and being an Asian American, and the struggle between the two. The story is pretty much about this father who is under threat of being deported because of an old law that basically his adopted parents forgot to sign some miscellaneous document, and now he's under threat of being deported. And on top of that, he's also under fire for he's an ex-con, and he was released from prison, and he's trying to reform his life, and so he can't get a decent job. He can't afford like the legal help he needs to stay in the country, and he's been in America for his whole life, and now he's going to be separated from his family and everything he knows. And it's this really like complicated story, and it's very dramatic. Some might say it's overly sappy and twists your emotions too much, but I thought it was fantastic. Justin Chon, again, he both is in the starring role and directs, and his girlfriend or wife is played by Alicia Vikander, and there's one scene in it where she is like acting with a capital A, and she's amazing in it. So yeah, this one, I was on the verge of tears by the end of this movie. I thought it was amazing. And it might be a fictional story technically, but it's rooted in so many similar real life parallel stories that it is like this meaningful drama, and I highly recommend it. Don't let this one go under your radar, because I don't really feel anybody buzzing about it, and I think that might be a mistake. So I definitely recommend checking out Blue Bayou. All right, the next movie I'm talking about is from 2013, and it's a movie called The Dirties, and this movie won the Slam Dance Film Festival. And basically what the Slam Dance Film Festival is, it's sort of an answer to the Sundance Film Festival, which is pretty much the biggest independent film festival, at least in America. And if a movie is rejected from Sundance, but it's still like considered like a high quality film, they'll screen it at the Slam Dance Film Festival as this sort of like, you know, celebration of the rejected movies. And this one was picked up, I believe, by Kevin Smith of Clerks fame, because he loved the movie. And pretty much what it's about, it's a found footage style movie, so it's shot to look sort of like it really happened sort of thing. And it follows two friends in high school who are sort of misfit outcasts. They are movie buffs, and they're constantly making their own movies to show in their class. But they're also constantly bullied by this group of guys in their school they dub the Dirties. And one day, these two outcasts get the idea that what if we pulled a prank on them? And by prank, I mean they want to shoot them on camera for their next movie. So instead of staging like a fight or something, they're actually going to get their revenge and kill them. So it's pretty much like an analogy to like the Columbine Massacre or any of these other tragedies that we've seen unfold, unfortunately, in high schools. And this movie was weirdly like relatable. It's not relatable in the fact that, you know, I don't often see things lead to violence, but in terms of the two kids being outcasts and not feeling like they fit in, this is something that like a lot of teenagers really relate to, and you can see how one thing builds on another, and it's very natural, their relationship. It reminded me a lot of the friendships that I had in high school, but in this case, you know, it goes into dark territory where it's like this point of no return. And it reminded me sort of there's another movie by Gus Van Sant called Elephant that's sort of this, again, this Columbine-esque narrative where we follow two, you know, a limited amount of characters go throughout their day. It's very normal, but we know in the back of our minds that it will end up in tragedy. So this movie, it weirdly has a lot of humor to it, it weirdly has a lot of heart to it, but it also has this like heaviness and this real life horror simmering underneath. So it's this really interestingly toned story. The only complaint I have about it is it's supposed to be this found footage movie, but it's never explained who the cameraman is, so you kind of have to accept it in the same logic as a show like The Office, where it's kind of unbelievable that the camera person is there for the whole time. But if you can get past that, if you just accept the movie for what it is, it's a really interesting story. Done very well, and it's sort of, again, I think September for me was a month of hidden gems sort of movies. So I highly recommend checking out The Dirties for a sort of twisted story of high school outcasts getting their revenge. All right, and my final pick for September is a horror movie from last year called Host. And this movie was actually made during the pandemic, and it was shot entirely through Zoom screens. So it's this paranormal thriller set entirely within people's computer screens. And pretty much it's about this group of girls who hold a seance over Zoom, a Zoom call. And of course they accidentally unleash a demon, and it's sort of like Paranormal Activity meets, you know, Zoom. Its style reminded me a lot of this other movie called Searching, which was one of my favorite movies of that year, which was, again, a movie told entirely through computer screens. You could think of this as almost like a gimmick, but I really like how all of these movies sort of utilize all of these apps that we use almost every day, right? And it uses that knowledge, our knowledge of how technology is used, usually to our benefit, and it works that knowledge against us for, you know, tension and scares. I think this is a really clever movie, and I think maybe years from now, this movie might be viewed as a time capsule of the COVID era. It just perfectly captures this moment in time that we're sort of all living through. And at only an hour long, it's sort of a perfect Halloween sort of watch. Maybe before you hand out candy for the trick-or-treaters. Host might be a really good horror movie to catch for spooky October season. So I highly recommend that one, and that one's exclusively playing on the Shudder app, but you might be able to find it for download elsewhere. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you maybe found a movie to check out in the future. Definitely next month for October, I'm probably going to have a lot of horror movies, I would guess. So look forward to that, and look forward to another keyboard video very soon as well. So yeah, I have a lot going on. So again, thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.